Two. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, 5 Key Steps to a Successful Business Case, presented by the Director of Business Solutions at Watermark Company, Dr. Susan Heidorn. My name is Mariela Salinas, and I'll be assisting and moderating our session today. We are in Zoom for today's webinar, and we will be sharing a copy of this recording with all of you in an email after the session. We do encourage participation throughout the session, so please use the chat or the Q&A option for our short Q&A after the presentation. Educate 360 is so excited to present this webinar today, so without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Dr. Heidorn.
Well, thank you so much, Marielle. I appreciate it. And happy Wednesday, everyone. Hope wherever you are, your week is going well. We are going to take time to talk about 5 key steps to a successful business case. And if you have any questions or any comments, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll try and monitor it. I know Marielle is going to monitor it with us also. Some of it I may just answer as we move on. Otherwise, I might also answer it towards the end. So without further ado, let's get started. So we're going to talk about what are the essential components of an effective business case. You know, at least let's get the core down so that we know what are those things that we have to have a successful business case. We're going to talk about planning and using approach. We're actually going to give you a framework to remember those key components that are in a business case. And we're also going to talk about common pitfalls when recommending and justifying projects. But first, I kind of know I need to know where you're coming from, what your experience is. And so we're going to have a little bit of a poll here just to tell me where you're at. Have you never created a business case? Have you reviewed them? Because I know sometimes I get people who go, well, I've reviewed them, but I haven't created them. I occasionally created them, but I want to, get better, or I'm looking for just some tips. Because I always figure I can always, no matter what I do, I get some extra tips from other people is always kind of fun. So just kind of throw in your 2 cents here. I got about 63% participating, looking for at least 80% before we go. So hopefully just throw in the chat, kind of so I know my audience a little bit better. So we have some, it looks like, that haven't created a business case, but you reviewed them. I work a lot with people who review them, but they don't necessarily create them. Occasionally create them. Looking for tips. All right, we're getting 74%. That's great. A few others just throw in your answers just to kind of see where you're all coming from, to use a really old adage, a little old saying for today. Hey man, where are you coming from? Kind of a 60s vibe.
All righty, I'm going to go ahead. Awesome participation, and here are the results.
All right. So awesome. It looks like 37% haven't created one. So welcome. I'm glad you're here. Review them, but don't create them. So maybe you'll get a few techniques on what to look for as you review. Occasionally create them, but want to make sure that you got everything into consideration. And frequently is about 8%, 4 of you. Create them just looking for extra tips. So I'm hoping that we can give you extra tips and move on as we move forward. So thank you very much. I'm going to stop. Mariella, do you want to just stop sharing if it's still shared? I don't know if it is.
Yeah, I went ahead and stopped sharing.
Perfect. All right. So let's get on. What is a business case first? Let's just lay the foundation before we get started. It's really, business case is a decision-making tool. It's looking at, gee, we could do a lot of things in the organization, right? We could do this project, we could do this project, we could do this project. And which one do we pick? Because normally, and I'm going to say almost every organization I've worked with only has so much time, so much money, and so many resources. And it's like, we can't do them all. So what do we want to do? And they'll use a business case to make that decision. If I'm going to invest in this versus this or this, what makes the most sense? It's kind of like, looking at your own checkbook, right? Or so-called checkbook, your bank account, and saying, okay, I can purchase this, I can purchase this, I can purchase this, but I can't purchase all three. So generally what you want to do is say, okay, if I can't purchase it all, at least I don't have a money tree in my backyard, is figuring out what is going to give me the most value, or even if, let's say you're looking at a new vehicle, you've got, okay, I can purchase this or this or this. I can't obviously purchase all three. What is going to best meet my needs, right? And so we make decisions like that all the time. Organizations need to make decisions all the time, because if you don't have a business case, and then things are just going to get in the pipeline, and it's like, and then somebody will decide, why are we doing this? Are we getting, a return on our investment? Who made that decision? It just gets, it's not prioritized. And what you want to do is be able to prioritize, because that business case normally goes into, if you have portfolio management in your organization, feeds into that portfolio management component, and then said, okay, we got a lot of great ideas, but which one makes the most sense to do now, given our resources? Where's the best spot to put our money? And so it's a decision-making tool looking at and comparing investment opportunities for any new project. Also, it's a tool to clarify business value and making sure that said, you know what, if we do this project, this is the value that I'm going to get out of this project. Because if you can't prove value in your business case, if you can't figure out return on investment, it's probably not going to be a very strong business case. So a business case is almost also a sales tool. If you think you have a really good idea, your department has a good idea, your clients or your stakeholders have great ideas, and you want to put a strong business case together, this is the way to do it. It's really a sales tool. It's like, why this? Why should I invest in this versus all that other stuff that I could be doing? And the stronger your business case is, the more likely it will get approved. I've created a lot of business cases for a lot of different organizations. I was a consultant for over 35 years, so helped organizations create business cases. And, the strongest business cases kind of came up to the heap. And so that's kind of what you want to do. It's not just, oh, I got to create a business case and, oh, here's a couple of pieces of information. This is really a communication tool. It's a sales tool for them to make a decision saying, yes, I think this makes sense. I think it should go forward. So when I created my business cases, they were almost always approved because I had everything that they needed and the answers they needed for that, making that decision on whether they wanted to move forward. So we're going to try and give you, I know this is only less than an hour. We'll try and give you a few tips though, to make your business cases a little bit stronger. So why do we need business cases in the first place? Let's just do everything. Well, we talked a little bit about that already, is just, you're doing lots of stuff. And again, we don't have enough resources, time, or money to do everything. So things get put on the back burner, or they're half done, or we decide not to go that any further because we're going to take our money and put it here. I mean, it's just a mishmash of everything. So much better if you say, hey, we need a business case. Now, most of the companies that I worked with have a threshold on business cases. So sometimes it depends on how large the company was. Sometimes it was like, okay, 500,000 or $1 million, we'll do a business case. Smaller companies, the threshold might be, 100,000. Anything above that, a business case, sometimes 50,000, you do a business case. Otherwise, if it's just a fix-it thing, probably not. You still need to prioritize it, but you may not need a full business case. So why do we need one? One is to make sure that this initiative, what we're writing our business case on, aligns to the organizational strategy. If it doesn't, why are you doing it? You might be going, this business case might take you left when your organization is trying to go right. Actually, I did that reversed. The other right. So you really want to make sure if you're trying to make a strong business case and making sure that, the executives, the people that make the decisions are going to go, yeah, we need to do this. Align it to where the organization's going, align it to those strategic initiatives, those strategies. Because if you can't align it and you can't, right there is the first part of value. If you can't provide value in that there's going to be an alignment to the strategy, you're going to not fare so well. Also making a collaborative decision. When I ever write a business case, I talk to the people that are going to be involved in the business case and make decisions about the business case. I try it out first. So I'll go into Bill's office and I'll go, hey, Bill, I'm writing up this business case, and I'm kind of thinking of some, options, just want to see what do you think, what will fly? And I'm always getting feedback early. So by the time I present my business case, it's always accepted. Why? Because I know what the pitfalls are. I know what the risk are. It's like Bill will go, well, Sally's not going to approve that because that's not going to work in her department. Oh, then I got to figure out a little bit of something different for that. So it should be a collaborative decision-making initiative as well as transparency. As I said, by the time I present it, everybody knows what's in it. There's no surprises. It's just like, okay, yeah, we know what's in it. Well, they might have a few questions, but generally I get those questions answered. So wherever I can get to the decision makers or the people that know the decision makers in order to get their input. Because as a consultant, I need to know what's going to fly into your organization, what is not going to, how do I need to present it? What are those key values that they're looking for? So it should offer transparency also, so that when you're creating that project and somebody goes, well, why are we doing this? This is where you're going to look. Here's the business case. Here's why we're doing it. Here's the value that we perceive we will get for this business case. So everybody kind of knows what the project's about, instead of asking, if you've ever been on those projects, which I've been on, why are we doing this? We shouldn't have to ask that. You should know that, and there should be that business case. Also, obviously, you need cost benefits. So you're going to provide options. Each one will have what is the cost of this, and the benefits. One of the things that I want to kind of explore a little bit with you, or give you a tip now, is when you do cost, also think of the maintenance costs. Because a lot of times when we do projects, and a lot of us are from IT, but even if you're not from IT, it doesn't matter if you're bringing in a new product. You're bringing in new software. Okay, that's great. So you have all those initial fees. It's going to cost me this much to develop, or it's going to cost me this much to purchase. It depends on if it's the build buy thing. And then you have to kind of figure out, okay, so we're really good. I'm going to just say we're really good at those initial costs. What is it going to cost to implement it, right? What's it cost to purchase it? What's the licensing cost? Well, we're not good at is being able to identify and provide the support cost. There's always support costs. Somebody has to support it, whether that's, looking at upgrades or licensing fees, user fees, even just monitoring it from, off and on. It's going to cost you money because you're having headcount go against that, right? So making sure that your costs include those support and operational costs as we move on, to get a really strong understanding of what this whole initiative would cost you over time. Certainly allocation of resources. As I said, organizations only have so much resources. So where are we going to put them? We can't put them on, 10 different projects at a time. That usually doesn't, if they're big projects, little fix-it projects, perhaps. But otherwise, we need to kind of figure out, who do we have? What do we have the resources? Do we have to bring in consultants and vendors into it. What do we have those resources that we need? Do they have the skills we need? So kind of figuring out all the resources that are needed. And, you know, as we said, we need to justify our ROI, return on investment. If I spend my money here, the organization's money, that means it can't be spent elsewhere. So will I get a return on my investment? I just don't want to throw money out the window. I want to make sure that there's a return. What return is there? And then just as you look at return on investment, you're also going to look at risk. You know, sometimes some organizations are very risk averse. So low risk and has to be kind of a return that you can, you know, certainly justify with that risk. And others, you know, embrace risk. It's like, hey, yeah, bring it on, because you know what, if it works, the return on investment is going to be a lot larger. It's kind of like just investments. If you have an investment account, it's kind of the same thing. So you're trying to justify that investment, and then of course being offset by risk. Understanding the business value. At the end of the day, what value am I going to receive? And value is going to, like, are we going to increase customers? Are we going to increase revenue? Are we going to increase our productivity? Are we going to have happier customers? You know, what is it? What is it that's going to bring us business value? And value is always in the eyes of the beholder. So when you're working on a business case, you have to know what value those decision makers are looking for. And it might not be what they looked for last year, because things change, initiatives change, direction changes, we get new executives on board. So it's always behooves us to understand what value are they looking for. So if you're trying to create a business case and you're wanting to make a good sale for doing this, you got to know what business value they care about, because you might be just capturing yesterday's news. The other thing is a single point of reference. So when you do a business case and gets approved, then if you do project charters or some type of project document, that feeds off the business case. Even if you're an agile organization, it doesn't matter. That is kind of the key direction that you're going to look at. So that becomes your single point of reference, going to answer why. Why are we doing this project? Because if we don't, that project can just go off the rails. Understanding that the project or the business case actually addresses the problem that needs to be solved. Or it could also be an opportunity. But if we can't, when we look at those solutions, we got to make sure those solutions in the business case, and certainly the recommended solution, solves the problem. How does this solve the problem? How does it take advantage of that opportunity? And so the other thing is, and of course I talked about this a little bit earlier, getting stakeholder buy-in. Get it even before you present the business case, get their buy-in. See what they're thinking. See what, you know, if you can identify any challenges, any solutions, like, well, that's not going to go. We can't do that here, you know. And so that was always key when I was presenting and creating my business case, is making sure that I got stakeholder buy-in. Okay, so who creates the business case? Well, anybody can. Generally, those people, stakeholders that are familiar with the day-to-day operations or see a problem, could be a manager, could be a key stakeholder, but anyone who's kind of like in the trenches and saying, gee, this is a problem we need to fix, or an opportunity we need to take advantage of, so they can certainly be involved in it. Anyone who understands the business drivers, either for the employee or group. So it's like, you know, our customer's been asking for this, you know, so this product or this service or whatever they're doing. Or our competitors are offering something we don't. So it may behoove us to look at this, right? So it can be business analyst. As a business analyst and a project manager, I created a lot of business cases. Product managers, business relationship managers, who are kind of the represent oftentimes the service group and the business. Anyone from the PMO, consultants, of course, as a consultant, I did many of those. Strategists, product, I guess product managers, project managers, line managers. So anyone really can create it. Now, most companies have certain groups that create their business cases. There's sometimes where I would find a group that would say, you know, anybody can create a business case, but you would have to have like sign off. So if I had a manager, I'd have to have my manager really kind of promote the business case. So it's usually somebody who knows what's going on, who can represent the business or IT or HR, or whatever group you are doing your business case for. So basically, almost anybody. So what is in a business case, you ask? Okay, these are the things that are generally found in a business case. And I'm going to ask you in a little bit as we go through this, is what is missing that you have in your business cases that you have seen. So generally there's an executive summary. So if the executives don't want to read the whole thing, there's, you know, kind of a one page, here are the highlights. That's just fairly normal. Then this is the business need and rationale, and we're going to dig in more detail about that as we move forward. But this is really the key that's often missing, you know, that isn't really brought out in full view. They'll have a situation statement. Well, the customers aren't happy, or the employees need a new report. I mean, just something basic. It's like, well, so what? What is this? And we're going to talk about how to identify the need in future slides here, but it's really about being clear about what the need is. What is the rationale? Why are we doing this? Why are we wasting our time? Business cases take time. If you're not going to get value from one, I would say don't do it, because they do take time. So really having, because remember I said this was a sales tool as well as a decision-making tool, really having a robust situation statement, the business need, the problem, or the opportunity, and how does it align to the strategy is key. And so you need to spend some time on this part of it. Root cause analysis, or it can be the opportunity driver. So if it's a problem, you're going to want to get down to the root cause, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Or if it's an opportunity, what are the opportunity drivers? What are the drivers that aren't doing it? The marketing is a driver, a new regulation coming down the pike. Is it our customers are demanding something new? What is driving this opportunity? And then recommendations, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. I'm just giving you a high perspective, high level perspective here, is that there should be multiple recommendations. So you're going to have maybe A, B, C, and D, whatever you want to call them. You're going to have alternatives. You might want to do a feasibility study. So which of these options, 1 through 4, is more feasible? You know, can we do it? Does it make sense? Do we have the skill sets? It might be a gap analysis that we need to do from the current state to the future state. What needs to be covered there? Cost benefit analysis. This is where all your financials also would come in, which we don't have laid out as well, but could be the cost benefit, return on investment, and net present value, payback period. And I always, when I do the financial analysis component, I always work with someone in finance, because I find that different organizations use different financial calculations for their business cases. And it's much easier if they tell me what they use than me just trying to figure it out and go, oh, we never do it. What's net present value? And so just trying to figure out what that is. And they might have a certain rate of return that you need to be above that threshold. Certainly risk. What are the risks of each solution? What are the assumptions we're making? You know, what they say about assumptions. And assumptions can get us into trouble. And so you always want to document your assumptions so somebody can say yay or nay. It's like, oh, Susan, I don't know where you're coming from, but that was a crazy assumption because that's not true. Or, so they'll verify it, but you want to get those assumptions down, because if you made assumptions on your financial calculations, well, I'm going to assume that the vendor isn't going to increase their, cost. Well, given the craziness of of what's going on in our economy right now, who knows whether that would be true or not. So what are those assumptions that are going into the financial calculations, the assumptions that we're going to assume that the solution will work with other solutions or work within our technical infrastructure, whatever it is. And then constraints. Constraints are always time, cost, budget. I mean, those are the normal project constraints, but it could be business constraints. There might be some business rules, some regulations that we have to conform to. So understanding those. And then any dependencies. Does this project, if we do it, depend on other projects? Is it impacted? Does this project have to come before this project? Or will this project impact other projects? And that you have to kind of consider as well. Implementation approach, we're going to do this a little bit later, so I'm not going to go too much into this detail. You're going to figure out your approach, your scope, your activities, budget, resources, stakeholders, and org change, which we'll talk about in a future slide. Also, evaluation measures. How are you going to evaluate? How do you know that we got the value we thought we were going to get? What are the success measures? Because if you can't tell that, people go, well, we just spent how many millions of dollars? Did we get any benefit from it? Well, I don't know. Well, it seems like customers seem happier. Well, how are you going to measure that? Are you going to do, sometimes it's taking those qualitative measures like satisfaction surveys and saying, okay, how do we make it more quantitative? So we know, oh, well, right now our customers are only on a, rank us at a 6, and we'd really like to be an 8 out of 10. So what does that look like? And then any next steps and any more detail you need to put in an appendix. And that's just general, things kind of vary. So I'm curious, and just put it in the chat, when you're looking and reviewing or creating your business cases in your organization, is there anything missing that you have that is not on that list? Because that's always interesting to think about, because this isn't certainly not the be all end all, but it does cover the basics that you need. So just throw it in the chat. This is the participatory part of it. Oh, timelines. Yeah, timelines and lunch, and that would be good too. Expect risk assessments. Yep. And I have risk here, but I didn't do the risk assessment piece of it. Yes, but I love it. Constraints, potential vendor insights. That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, the executive sponsor, who is the executive sponsor on this? That's certainly good. Timelines, roadmaps. And I like that, against corresponding priorities, so they can see how will this fit in. Yeah, I love that. Funding source, procurement method certainly can be a component of that too. Great. Awesome. So certainly if you have, if you need various funding sources, procurement methods, I know when I work with any government agency, whether it be the state or federal or counties, they all have certain funding and procurement restrictions on that. Justifications, if varying from the standard solution and roadmap. Yeah, Erin, I like that. Yeah. So anyone can create a business case, but you have to have an executive sponsor before creating it. Or creating the hope that a business sponsor will pick this up. I usually find an executive sponsor as I'm kind of creating it. It's like, okay, I'm going to create this case study or business case, business case. But I usually, find out an executive sponsor saying, hey, are you interested in this? What do you think? And that's where I'd use it as a sounding board before I even create it. Because if they're going to say, no way, I'm not going to spend my time creating it. It's like, no, that doesn't make sense. So anyone can bring it up, but you do have to find an executive sponsor. And I sometimes do that in conjunction. I give them the idea saying, hey, I'd really like to do a business case around this idea or this solution. And, you know, they'll say yay or nay, or what do I have to look out for? Or what are things I need to think about? So it just depends really on the culture of the organization. You will have to have an executive sponsor, and you want to get them on board, the buy-in. You want their buy-in, you want their blessing on the business case. So it's a good thing to get them up front. But if you're a simple PM, how do you get a sponsor? Not everyone can create it effectively. Yes. Again, hopefully you got some more tips to create a good business case more effectively. I would still get support before I created one though, because it does take time. So find out who will support it. Sometimes it's somebody in another department and saying, hey, you know, I have this idea. You know, would it merit a business case? You know, here's some of the value I see coming out of it. So those are some of the things that I would look at. So, all right, let's keep going here. So here is our framework that is kind of a nice acronym called SARIE. The person who created this would always say, you'll be sorry if you don't use it. So it's, you know, kind of a fun little acronym that kind of reminds you of, you know, what are the different components in a business case. So certainly you have to have the business need, the problem, or the opportunity. Then you have, you know, it's like, okay, we understand the you know, here's the problem we need to solve, or the opportunity, you know, and so it's like, okay, we have a request to create a business case. And the request might have been from me as I'm seeing things that, you know, be, oh, we could do this better, easier, faster, cheaper, whatever. And then we have the request, and that's the time where I usually would find a sponsor to make sure that, you know, they would have the funding and certainly sponsor the business case itself, and kind of help me work with other people who need to be the decision makers on deciding yes for this business case. So SARIE stands for understanding the situation or defining the situation, analyzing the situation, recommending solution options, determining implementation approach, and defining evaluation criteria. So the first thing is defining the situation. Now, here's the interesting thing. If you look back here, whoops, sorry about that little crazy mouse. We said it has to have a problem or opportunity. But here, when we define the situation, it's just like, okay, Houston, we have a problem. Not sure what it is. So then this is where you define that situation. You usually got to have a problem or opportunity to start with, but we're not sure what the root cause is. We're not sure what the real opportunity is. So we're digging deeper when we say define the situation. So this is where we capture the problem and then figuring out what is the actual need, getting the facts, just the facts stays. Because somebody might come to and says, well, I think this really needs to be fixed. Okay, well, let's dig in a little bit deeper. What needs to be fixed? Because we want to be able to say, let's look at the root cause versus just a symptom. Because if it's a symptom, the problem might never go away. And then somebody's going to say, why in the heck did we spend all this time and money on this business case that it didn't fix it? So this is where we need to dig deeper. And so it's kind of like being, you know, a private detective, getting down to the root cause. If any of you watch any of the detective shows or whatever, or NCIS or CIS, or I mean, all the multiple bazillion shows that they have out there, they actually get, you know, they have to get to the right need, to the right person, to the right problem, you know, on whatever they're looking at. And so a good situation statement has a number of things. First of all, facts. And I want to say this again. Facts is the data. Data is just neutral, but it should be neutral because we don't apply meaning until we understand it, and indisputable. So if you're creating a business case and you don't have the actual facts, people are just going to poke holes in it. And if it's, if not everybody agrees to those facts, then they're not going to go with you either. So this is why I said this is an open discussion with those decision makers. So it should be an objective statement. It's not like, well, Susan thought this would be a good idea. Well, nobody cares what I think. I usually tell people what I think, but probably nobody cares. What is the data that is driving this? How many customers are asking for this? Because I can say, wow, there's a lot of customers asking for this. Well, maybe there's 3 and they're just really mouthy customers that are always offering their 2 cents, right? That would be me. So what are, and is it 3 customers out of, 10? Wow, that might be pretty important. 3 customers out of 1 million? Well, it depends on if they're your best customer or not. So really getting the data behind it, you need the data. Otherwise, you don't have anything. You just have an inkling going, well, I think we should fix this. It just doesn't seem right. Who is affected or what is affected by the current situation? And then the impact. This is what I always call the Susan so what. And I never use so what to my clients. So yeah, so what? This is a problem. What I do make them think about though is why is this important? What is the impact? Why do we even have to fix it? Organizations have tons of problems. Let me tell you, I have been as a consultant for over 35 years, been into many, many organizations, from government organizations to nonprofit organizations to for-profit organizations, big organizations, small organizations. We all have problems. Why? And we're not going to have time to fix them all. So why this? Why does this need to be addressed? What is the impact? How big is it? Is it a breadbasket or an elephant? How large or severe is it? So you want to quantify those impacts. As I said when I was talking about the 3 customers, 3 out of 10 or 3 out of 10 of your best customers? Yeah, probably pretty important. 3 out of 1 million? Yeah, do we really need to do this? So you're trying to understand, and that's why I say the so what, because to me, when in my head, I go, okay, why is this important? Kind of the so what? Why is this important? Why should we fix this versus everything else we could be working on fixing? Why is this critical? What value is it going to give us? How big is this? And this is where you need those data components, and not just say, well, our customers are unhappy. Okay, how do I know that? They're not smiling at me? I don't know. It has to be measurable on understanding how big this is. So here's some, if I can get moving here, examples. So loan applications at Speedy Mortgage require an average of 45 days to process as opposed to industry standard 30 days. So I might, and this is usually where it ends. It's like, okay, if I even get that. Otherwise, it'll say, well, it takes us 45 days to process. So if you were an executive, would you say, really? Okay, 45 days. Do we get our money? Are customers happy? Why do I care? So this is where you go, okay, so our industry standard, however, is 30 days. So it takes us 15 days longer. Huh, interesting. So why should I care? Well, the delayed application approvals and final closings and an estimated cost of $200 per closed loan. So we have delayed money coming in. Loan abandonment rate of 5%. Losing 10,000 revenue per loan. $1.2 million is why you should care. You don't think that's going to open some eyes? You got to tell them why they need to care about this problem. They have lots of problems on their desk. They're not all going away. They'd like them to go away. but we just don't have the bandwidth to do them all. Why this one? I'm losing $1.2 million. Yeah, I think we better do it. That's why I said this is also a sales document if you want your projects done. Figure out what the pain points are. And it's been reported that the patient intake process at the emergency room at regional hospital has experienced an increasing waiting time over the past 2 years. Oh, okay, so increasing waiting time. Each patient waits an average of 2.5 hours compared to the hour. And actually, I have to say, when I've been at the hospital, and I haven't had to go too many times, but the wait time is a lot better than it used to be ever since COVID. So anyway, it's kind of interesting. But anyway, situation has resulted 25% increase in trauma escalations in the past 2 years. If you were a hospital, would you really want to increase trauma escalations? Because you know what? That just means more people in the emergency room and less time with your patients and getting them, even worse because you can't pay attention to them. So I was in the hospital with my stepfather in a little hospital, little community hospital up here in northern Minnesota. And they were looking for a hospital to send them because this is, little community hospitals kind of do more triage, if anything, They do the simple stuff, they stitch you up or put a Band-Aid on. But if it's anything more complicated, they got to send you to a bigger town with more hospital amenities, I guess. And they were just checking all around because hospital beds are kind of hard to find. And this one hospital had well, we can't accept them. We got 75 people in the emergency room waiting. It's just like, oh my gosh, 75 people. It's like, well, holy cow. When waiting for a bed. So that might be something that, wow, we kind of need to address. And it could be a lot of things. Does it need more space? Does it need more doctors? Do we need more nurses? Do we need, and that's where you would actually look into root cause. And so this is the key. If you can't really say what the situation is based on data and why they care, does the organization really want to put money to it? The better you have of this situation going, oh, I'm going to lose $1.2 million, I better care. Or I'd better have a darn good reason when my CEO comes down on me saying, what the heck? So having that. Again, I'm pointing this out because these are the two key things. What is it? Data only, not just because you think or somebody else thinks. It's like, here's what the data is saying. You have to have it backed up by data. We need to be a data-driven organization. That, the impact, and then alignment. So how does this align to where we're going and the direction we're going? So you want to make sure that that's there. And then you need to analyze the situation. Are we solving the right problem? So at first it's going to be nebulous. Our first situation statement is going to be a little nebulous because we got to capture something because we got to go, where do we look, right? And so it's like, well, I think there's a situation where, our loan processes take too long. Okay, so let's dig down because what you're going to do is you're going to analyze the situation, then you're going to come back and say, let's look at the situation and add more robustness, the impact to that. But there's a lot of techniques that you can do to root cause, because if you don't look at root cause, anything will work. It's kind of like going to the doctor and they say, you tell the doctor, oh, I got a pain in my leg. And they go, oh, I'll take 2 aspirin, call me in the morning. And I broke my leg. Those 2 aspirin are not going to help fix my leg if I broke it. So let's make sure that we're fixing the root cause and not a symptom. The symptom here would be the pain. The thing is why the pain? What's causing the pain? The pain is just an indicator something's wrong, right? And so we need to be able to move down the ladder and figure out what's going on. So you got the 5 whys that are always quite used. Pareto chart, which I like, if you have like help desk tickets or customer, complaints or whatever you can numerically have that information. It just tells you about the frequency, about the issues. So if you're looking here, whatever this issue that they were looking at, you put them in order. And so if I'm going to look for root cause, I'm going to look at the things that are just, customers are complaining about the most and not the least. Fishbone diagram, many of you probably did fishbone diagram. You have what the issue is, and then you just brainstorm. And you usually brainstorm in categories, so you're not forgetting any. This is materials, machines, methods, people. And then you just say, what about materials are causing customer reports? What about machines are causing them to get out not on time? What about methods, or what about people? And then you circle the ones that are most likely, and you might need to do some more root cause on that. Process analysis, if you have a process and it's like, well, that process is not doing too well. You could even look at that process that we just talked about, the loan processing. Okay, it takes 45 days. Maybe I put it out there and going, where can we scrunch? So it's a lot less than 45 days, and maybe we get to the industry standard of 30. What are they doing differently? So you can just put a quick process together and see what might be happening. What's sitting on somebody's desk not getting processed? Why is the underwriters taking so long, or whatever it is? And then to get to the root cause of the root cause, sometimes you can say, okay, what are kind of the top root causes? And usually you can't do more than 10, but then you can kind of figure out, as you say, which ones influence each other, and then you find the major influencer. In this case, it's shortage of staff. These were ideas too, which could come from the fishbone diagram, could come from the process. But what is the final of the final, right? Which one is the biggest one? And here, the reason you get the shortage of staff is because it has the most arrows out, impacting other things. If we fix this, we can probably fix other things. So that is an interrelationship diagram. All of these are in our conducting root cause class, if you would like to know more about how to create them. Solution options has to address the business need. Okay, so whatever we figured out, whatever that root cause was, right? Or the drivers of the, opportunity, the solution should directly address it. So when you do solutions and want to recommend solutions, first you got to figure out solution options before you even pick the recommended one, right? You got option A, B, C, or D. One of them is always going to be status quo, because it is always an option. You don't have to do anything, but there's a cost. There's a risk that we need to capture, because people go, well, why do we need to do that? Well, you don't. We don't have to do anything. You might want to, though. So always include option A should be always status quo, stay the same. Then you also, as you're figuring out options and brainstorming them, it's like, okay, now that we know the root cause, let's just brainstorm what are the options that we can have. Maybe it's a technology or software, maybe it's improving the process, maybe it's reorganizing the organization, maybe there's 2 or 3 different software elements we could do. I mean, it could be anything, it could be a combination thereof, but it has to directly relate to the problems. And so you put the problems here. This is kind of just a nice table, like siloed functions, application process too slow, back to speedy mortgage, entrenched, inefficient verification process, and then you look at the options. We have one, status quo, process improvements, some type of system, maybe reorg, or maybe a little bit of both. But then you compare it. How does this option B address this problem? How do these address this problem? So you're making sure that those problems get addressed by that solution, and you're showing transparency. You're showing everyone how it relates together. Ensure all the perspectives are represented. Provide information on why not the other alternatives weren't selected. It's like, okay, status quo, why not selected? wasn't going to solve any of our problems, for one, and it still is going to cost us $1.2 million because that's what it's costing us now. And then also making sure you do for your recommended option, because you're going to, okay, I'm going to go with option C. That seems to be addressing most of the problems. You know, looking at the risk, looking at the opportunities. So you usually do a cost benefit and risk analysis for your recommended option. Then, of course, you have to implement, and we're not creating the project plan here. We're just saying high level, what is it going to cost and what is resources it going to take to implement this if we say yes to this business case. And first you got to have approach is a build buy or combination. So are we going to, you know, create our own process or software? Are we going to buy someone's? You know, what is that? Certainly figure out the resources needed, you know, and then whether they're in-house resources or contracted resources. Determining the milestones. So what are the milestones? And this is where someone had mentioned earlier, you know, what is the roadmap and how does this fit in with the roadmap would be another good piece. Stakeholders, who's impacted, who's not impacted. I always like to make sure that I do, when I'm looking at scope, what's in and out, and not only, you know, software components in and out or processes in and out, but also stakeholders in and out. So I know which stakeholders are going to be impacted, which are not, or which ones we're going to do this for. Maybe it's not everyone, even if they're impacted. The budget and a high level, and this is something that I add, and I don't see in very many business cases. But here's the thing, anytime you have a business case, which will be moved into a project, we hope, it's a change. It's an organizational change. You're asking people to change, whether it's a change in the process. Now they have to do the process differently, so their behaviors have to change. If it's new software, now they have to learn a new software. Processes and people have to change. So you want some type of org change. And if it's not big enough, because a lot of times organizations have OCM managers or change managers for high level key projects, but not for kind of the mid-level projects or they're under, and it gets forgotten. And if you've ever had a project that has kind of gone down the tubes, it's either because we weren't solving the right problem or we didn't anticipate people not adjusting to that new change. I have an OCM background, and so I've been in situations where I've been the third consultant that called in because they couldn't get the project through because people were just resisting so much. Third time. And they kept trying. I said, well, I made some adjustments when I went in. They're saying, hey, we're not trying, we're going to do it. And we did, but you know, you got to get the people's buy-in too. So, but again, this is not, you're not creating a whole project plan. It's just like high level. What are we thinking here? And then defining the evaluation criteria. Why are we doing this? What is the value? Are we, you know, saving cost? Are we voiding cost? Are we increasing revenue, profit, happier customers, better employee morale? Bigger market share? What is it? What are we doing this for? And how are we going to measure? How are we going to measure that? How do we know if we saved any money? How do we know if we've increased revenue? How do we know if we have happier customers? Got to measure, or you won't know. And that's the key. So having a value plan, I always attach my value plan to my business case. So I usually have, because normally you can't measure value until after it's been implemented, right? And so what is the owner? What's the outcome? What is the time frame? When are you expecting? Because value doesn't come in a one-time shot. Well, gosh, you know what? June 30th, full value. We'll get all that increase in revenue or increase in productivity, whatever it has. Well, if you think about productivity in itself, what happens to productivity when people are learning something new? They don't get faster, they get slower. And because sometimes that's not understood, I have seen projects be discarded because it's like, well, I thought this was supposed to be an increase in productivity and people are slower than they used to be. Yeah, if you measured in 3 months, measure maybe in 9 months when they get used to it and they can kind of now do it in their sleep again like they could the old system. Yeah, they're going to get faster. But you got to set that expectation because people always think about, oh, it's been implemented. Where's my productivity gains? Let's be realistic. You're not going to get productivity gains immediately. It's going to, and sometimes I even do a roadmap of when value should be achieved because you're not going to get it on day one. I'm just going to say generally, some value you can get on day one. Most value you will not get on day one. So what is the time frame of measuring? Maybe there's, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. What is the measure? What's your target? What are you aiming for? 10% increased productivity, 20% increased productivity, 10% increase in revenue. What is it? Where are your data sources? Got to have data sources. You don't know where it is. Sample size. If we're looking at mortgages, do we test all of them? Do we test, here and there? It's kind of like going through TSA TSA pre-check, but just going through the lines in the airport, right? So they do a sample. So most people can go through the regular line of getting scanned, but if it beeps, you go into the other more thorough scan. Or if your number is up, you go through the more thorough scan. Not that you did anything wrong, it picked the number, that sample size. The frequency of measurement, reporting, who do you report it to? What does reporting look like? How does it align with the KPIs? And so those are some of the things to think about. Pitfalls to avoid before we get going here. Owning the solution or decision. We don't own the solution or decision. That's the sponsor. Not aligning it to organizational strategies. I talked about that. Presenting only one solution and no alternatives and no status quo. So the do nothing, you have to have the do nothing option. Failure to get buy-in. Always get buy-in. It makes it so much easier. Get a sponsor, get buy-in, test things out. What do you think about this solution? Would it go? Would it fit? Would it work? Omitting cost justification, and I'd also say omitting risk. You got to have risk. Excluding ongoing operational and support costs, because that's going to expand your cost. And if you're not transparent with it, somebody's going to go, well, gosh, that cost a lot more than we thought it was. Well, because you probably didn't put your operational and support cost in. Assumptions and constraints aren't identified. And we talked about that, risk not assessed. And not addressing the org change. So these are the pitfalls. And owning the solution decision means that we certainly don't own it as the person creating the business case. So some things to think about, pitfalls to avoid, and hopefully you can describe the essential components of a business case. Look at approach and avoid those common pitfalls. And so I'm just going to leave you with classes that are coming up. And any questions? We have 2 minutes for questions.
Absolutely, Dr. Hydern. We had a question, and let me know if you got to this one. I believe you did. So if between a business need over a request, you don't find a sponsor, don't do the business case work until you find one, correct?
Well, generally the business case will need a sponsor, yeah. So if you don't have a sponsor, it's going to be very hard to, generally, my experience only, and somebody else can say, no, that's not how we do it here. My experience is if you don't have a sponsor, then they're not going to be able to get approval for the business case, so.
Excellent. Yeah, and then they also followed up with, I guess on this, we get a sponsor before we confirm it's a root cause versus a symptom.
Well, not necessarily. You can. I mean, it's kind of nice to say, hey, I want to look at this more, but you may have done some root cause analysis just, in your normal daily work, and then you bring it saying, hey, this really needs to be fixed. So.
Fantastic. And we had another question. If you could cover number one, the number one pitfall again.
Oh, I
What
did.
is
I
that?
think I did that.
Oh, nice. You got that. Okay,
Yeah, yep.
perfect. Excellent. Awesome. Thank you, Tatiana. And I saw a question on a copy of this deck. You will absolutely be receiving a copy of this recording of Dr. Hyder and us doing the poll and going through the presentation. So you'll get a copy of that whole session in your email after the webinar. And I think that was it, unless there was another couple of questions, but I
Well,
believe.
thank you all for staying with me, and I hope you have at least a few tips on your next business case, or maybe I'll see you in a future class. I'd love to see you there too. So good luck, everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And if you want any more info on this topic or want to learn a little bit more, please do not be afraid to visit us at watermarklearning.com or that link I dropped in the chat. Thanks again, Dr. Heidorn.
Thank you all. Have a good rest of your week.
Absolutely. Thanks everyone for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you all very soon in the classroom. Bye for now.